once again, is there an alternate lens, a deeper look at data that will help us back up these feel-good vibes? And the answer is yes. What I've done here is I have put together a surface plot, and I want to sort of highlight a couple of trends that we've identified when we look at the Pakistan census data. Let me first walk you through what I've done here, right? So the underlying data comes from the Pakistan census 2017-18. What we're showing is education distribution by age bracket. This plot, this direction, this axis gives you ages, right? So this is ages 20 to 24, this is ages 75 plus. This plot, this axis gives you a sense of education level. So this is people who have education below primary, middle, inter, masters, and others. And this is the proportionate part of the population of the segment that stands in a given category or bucket at that time. Now, from a perspective point of view, from a framing point of view, you have to look at a couple of things. So this group, the 75 plus group, this is my father's generation. This is Abbas' generation. This, the 50 plus group is my generation. This is the generation before me, which is, the 40 plus group, and this is my kids. So the 20 plus group, right? So 1, the youngest, the most recent, 2, slightly older, 3, me, us, you, and 4th is my parents, right? 4 generations in this one specific direction. Is there anything that stands out to you when you look at this data and this analysis? I'm not being fair. I've spent a lot of time with this data set, so I can see a lot of stuff. For somebody who's seeing the surface diagrams the first time, it's fairly complex and complicated. Let me give you a slightly different perspective and a different view. So a more closer look. This is same data, but expanded so that you can observe it closely and see if you can make head or tails out of what I'm trying to show you. Remember, my father's generation, my generation, the generation just after me, and my kids' generation. No, still can't see it? All right, let me change the perspective and the view. How about now? So you're now observing it from the other side, from the opposite side. No? Again, referencing. Remember, my generation, the generation just after me, my kids' generation. Those are the reference points. You should be able to see something now. Still no? Different perspective. There we go. So now you're seeing it from the front, right? This is Abbas' generation, my father's generation, the 75 plus group. And this is, the generation just after me, and that at the back are my kids' generation. So now you should be able to see this, right? You can see this. For my father's generation, the biggest chunk of the population, education-wise, the 75 plus group, peaked at primary. And somewhere around here was my generation. Somewhere around here, I think this was my generation. If you look through it, you can't really tell. But if I sort of strike it down, my generation sort of got it to middle, maybe metric. The generation after me is here, and my kids' generation is about here. Do you see a shift? You can see that as far as peak education, maximum education, higher education is concerned, each generation is moving upward on the education graph. You can see this here also, right? So if you step back, you can see the peaks. The peak here corresponds to this. The peak here, this peak should correspond to maybe this part, right? And the peak here will most likely correspond to this piece. Is this backed by anecdotal data? Yes, certainly. I think when I graduated, not even graduated, when I finished my high school all the way back in 87, 88, 89, at that point in time, there were maybe about there was only a single school that offered a pure computer science education in Karachi. 35 years later, I think there are at least 15 schools that offer that same specialization. And 30 years ago, it was pure computer science. Today, you've got a wide variety of choices and variations. You could do CS, you could do animation, you could do gaming, you could do communication and design, you could do graphic design. You have a wide range of choices and specialization available to you as a young student exploring undergraduate education in Pakistan. There are questions, there is debate, there are challenges, issues with respect to reach, accessibility, quality of education, impact, skill set, employability. All of those are fine and well, but the fact still remains 30 years ago, these options did not exist. Today they do. So from a availability point of view, from an opportunity point of view, it is possible, certainly possible, for every generation that follows to go higher, significantly higher than the generation before them. But if you really want to visualize the impact, look at percentage growth. Look at percentage growth one generation to the next. And if you look at this part, right, which is the generation, so my generation, my father's generation, and the generation immediately after me, we did well. Every generation grew. We did well. Every generation did a little better than the generation before us. But when you look at the younger lot, the generation that's coming, the spike is phenomenal. Look at these transitions. You're looking at an average shift of 40% plus in certain age groups and education combination. And the most interesting part, the brightest part of this analysis is the shift from here to here. So as these generations move forward, as they grow older, when you look at the relative shift and change, when you look at what happens as this generation, the generation that is in school, in colleges right now, uses the available opportunities to educate them, to climb higher on the education curve, when more people get into graduate and postgraduate programs, when you translate this shift of increased accessibility, reach to higher education, leading not just to higher productivity but also higher income, the profile of the middle class will change again for the better. And the future they will live through will be far better than the future we've lived through. That, my friends, is the brightest part of our story and our analysis.